Howdy peeps, I suppose this is a bit of a response video, kind of self-imposed collaboration with Square.Peg's video that he done recently regarding vaping and making your own coils and the difference between an RDA, which is one of these, so we can get that in the camera. So this is a Smock Alien 220 watts, the multicoloured version if you're really that interested. Really easy to use. It does come with the standard tank, glass tank with the element fitted inside. I suppose it's down to personal choice. With Square.Peg on what he's saying with regarding making your own coils and whatnot. The juice I use, well, this is a 7030. Not really advertising for them, but Riot Squad Sublime is one of my favourites. This is a zero nicotine one. Over here in the UK, they're not allowed to mix it for you. You've got to put your own nic shot in there, and obviously you've got the choice between nic shots and nic salt, and obviously salt is the harsher one in my opinion, but that's subjective. So I suppose the Coil Masters, the Smock Alien, you can get probably for about 40 quid, I think, off of eBay. So it's probably going to be about 45, maybe 50 bucks over in the US. One thing I would recommend is getting yourself a little coil kit, if that's what you're going to do. If you're trying to move away from smoking cigarettes over to vaping. I know quite a few people who've tried the transition and it didn't quite work out, and I'm one of them. So let's open up the little box of tricks. Again, this only cost about 30 quid, so maybe 35 bucks, 40 bucks, something like that. And what you get in it, this is all surplus, that's all my stuff that I got separately. In this section here, you did get your own little thin piece of coil, which I think I might have in one of these packets. I'll have a look. But obviously you got your pliers, you got your side cutters, you got your tweezers with your ceramic tip. You got your angled tweezers, and you got a Phillips head screwdriver and a ordinary style screwdriver. So that's that. Obviously that's all for cutting and bending and whatnot. You get these little scissors, which I think are really cool. Just flip out. You can get these cheap enough on Amazon as well. About a tenner I think, or something like that, for two. Coincidentally, since you're undoubtedly going to see one of my snap-on objects. That'll be the brush. That's this thing here. I'll tell you what, I'll talk a bit about the brush and I'll go through what I do. So that's just a relatively soft wire brush. Again, that's for cleaning the coil once you've been using the vape for quite some time. Some people just prefer to burn it off. Take the old cotton out, burn it off, and that does the trick. Obviously that's for cutting down the length of the cotton that you need within the coil itself for the burning. I suppose I could do a quick demonstration. What I tend to go for is I think it's 35 or is it 40? I think it's a 35 or a 40 I usually go for. Whichever one of these comes out easiest, so it's not 40, so it will be 35. Yeah, so I use the 35. And in the box you also get this little contraption here. I'll grab the 35 out as well. Obviously you've got the different sizes, 35 on this side, 40 on this side. And that's for basically when you're actually bending the coil around. This opens up like so, just twist and go, happy days. Obviously insert that through there. That will then lock it in place. And that is then ready and waiting. Obviously you've got your two little insert points. You've got a flat bit around here which you can use to put the wire in if it starts flipping out. I tend to just use my finger to hold it in place whilst I turn it, but we'll get to that in just a second. Right, so the wire I tend to use is flat 60. What gauges? I've got a funny feeling. I don't even know, I think I've changed the packet. I couldn't tell you what gauge it is, to be fair, I apologise for that. But you can obviously get different gauges. This is probably about maybe a mil thick. I'll get into that one in just a second. With the Coil Master kit, by the way, you get the organic cotton. I've had this for a couple of years, by the way, so it's probably a lot cheaper than what I initially sort of set out. And again, all you get with this is just little coil packets of cotton for the coil. Obviously, just tear off what you need and bend it all around. So this is going to be try and make this a relatively quick video. I tend not to use this because it's not my go-to cotton. I believe this might be the wire. You know what? It's 22 gauge actually. It's 22 gauge wire what I use. That's the other stuff. You can see by comparison it is actually a lot thinner. If I put those side by side, it's probably about easily double the thickness, I suppose. Don't know how well you guys can see that, but yeah. I tend to use this stuff because it's, I don't know, it's not more malleable, it's just preferential, I suppose. The thin stuff I tend to use just to wear it out. Right, so let's go into RDAs. First things first, this is on. You can see I generally have it set to 33.1 watts. Half batteries on the juice. Right, let's just lock that. Some people go to switch it off. It works either way. Obviously, I would prefer if you switched it off before you do these, so you can't turn around and blame me for anything that goes wrong, because it's not my fault. Right, so this cotton I've had in about a week, to be fair. You can see where it's been soaking up all the... should tell you what's been up. Let's do this properly. Right, grab one of them, and I'm probably going to need one of these. It's a Phillips screwdriver. I see that's a flathead on those. Probably won't need that one. So, what I tend to do is, just for the sake of ease of convenience and everything, like I say, people, you're probably better off switching yours off. If I get fried, it's my own fault, and feel free to take the piss. See, this, there you go, it's just literally falling apart by itself. So that, you can just use a tweezer to take that off. It does look vile and disgusting. It's not very pleasant if you get it on your hands. Well, it isn't oil at the end of the day, so that's no real surprise, I suppose. Alright, let's chuck that over there. I know you guys can't see a great deal right about now, but it's what it is. Right, so this one you got standard head screwdrivers. Actually, I'll just go into what people mean by when they burn it off. Is basically you take the wattage all the way up to say about 80 or 90. 80 watts normally does it, to be fair. Go with 85. While I'm doing this, I'll also demonstrate difference in burning. Ideally, when you're heating your coil up, you want it to go orange from the center and then work its way out. Obviously, if it's working its way from one side or the other, what will tend to happen is it will burn one of the legs off. So here we go. There you go, it catches fire and everything. Look at that. So you saw how quick that went up. That was obviously at 80 watts. Now, that's going to be red hot, so needless to say, we don't want to be touching that anytime soon. For the sake of the video, the reason I've got the brush is I'm going to put a new coil on there. What you can do with a soft brush is just clean all around that and just flick it off. I'd recommend doing it over a basin or a bowl or something, because you do get a lot of the excess burned crud, I shall call it. And yeah, basically that's not a lot of good, getting that stuff going everywhere. Have I even? Yes, I have locked it. See, you always got to double check. So as soon as you do that, you're putting a metal through electricity. Look, guys, I live the life of danger. All right, it's just how I am. Then yeah, basically what you can do is just unlock it using that, because these tend to stick on quite well, to be fair. And sometimes using your hands might not quite cut the mustard to remove it. I'm just going to get... There you go, so you can take that off. One of the things that the Smock Alien does do, which I think is quite a good thing, Just clean the top off, check out there for any residue of any oil or anything like that. Obviously if it's clean it's good, you don't want it affecting the contact. You can see under there it's relatively dry as well. Although it's got the grommets on the side there, sometimes you can get a bit of overfill going on there. Let's just throw that over there. Right, so moving on. One of the other cool little toys that you do get with your Coil Master is this. It's your ohm meter. Very important piece of kit. It can save you in some aspects. I've heard stories, I've never actually witnessed, but I've heard stories about coils going off in people's faces where they haven't wired it in right, and it's caused them a great deal of pain in some instances. I suppose with the coil wire itself, you can get used to wastefulness, because getting it at the right length is always a challenge, and you're always going to find yourself cutting bits off and whatnot. So this is where this little bit comes in. So I've got about, what, maybe 3.5 inches of coil there. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can go against the grain, which does make it slightly more difficult when it comes to bending it and twisting it round. So you can go against the grain, which would be that way, or you can go with it, which would be that way. Now, the disadvantage of doing it that way is this bit you'll have to bend round there. Like I say, generally speaking, I tend to use my hand, my thumb, sorry, not my hand. Alright, if I just grab one of these. So we're going for 35 gauge. The important part in all of that is making sure you can twist that around, and you might even need the pliers for that sometimes. See if I can get away with it. You'd think a seasoned pro would be able to do it. Right, okay, so again, you've got to make sure that's flat, and then you just literally just twist. Depending on the wire, I tend to go for like maybe 5 or 6 coils. So that's 3, 4, 5, and 6. And what you try and do is make sure that the legs land in a similar sort of location. Actually, that's about right. Okay, so you can see you've got a bit of excess there. You just simply cut that off. Let's just do it that way. Right, now, whilst I'm sort of mincing about, which is pretty much what I'm doing throughout the whole video, let's talk a bit about the point that Square.Peg was actually getting across. I'm sorry it's taken like 30 minutes to get to that stage, fella. Yeah, see, I'm quite with him with that one, that it would seem to be actually what you can also do is just straighten out that other end quickly, just to make it a bit easier when it comes to fitting it to the actual coil. Right, so you can see that side there, that's a sort of flatter end. So what you want to do is just sling that in there, and what I tend to do is just bend it up like that and just squeeze it in a bit, and there you go, then that's that. And if you need to bend that round a little bit for the sake of getting the legs in the right place, we can bend this one round as well. That's pretty much about right, he says. Yeah, I am with Square.Peg. I am under the impression that the tobacco companies don't like vapes unless they've got fingers in that pie, if you know what I'm saying. Because obviously with the whole vaping thing going, and that, you know what, that actually, the wind of that went up and went down quite quickly. So that's basically what the coil should sort of look like. I don't know where you can see that. Yeah, so I do think it was a case of the tobacco companies not having their fingers in that pie and them getting the amp, because obviously they're losing out on business, and no one wants to lose out on business, funnily enough. Right, so these, we just, what you can do actually is you can have a parallel set of, you can have 2 of these in there if you really wanted to, just have them left to right, left to right. What I tend to do is just go for the one, because then you're building less coils. I mean, some people say you get more vape cloud and this and that and the third, and it's like, well, I'm not really too fussed about any of that, to be fair. But yeah, you know, with the even the sort of newsreels that we were getting about vaping and, you know, the sort of stuff people were using in their vapes, and it's sort of like, well, yeah, you kind of got to expect to have a bit of a problem, you know. Some of the stuff, I mean, some of it was just absolute stupidity, so you can't really say that it's down to the vape companies or anything like that. Right, one of the things I would say with this is you want to make sure that the leg from the coil doesn't hit down the bottom. It's just an observation that I've made with this particular RDA. It's a Dead Rabbit RDA, by the way, in case I never gave that one out there. Yeah, it tends to short out for some reason if it actually hits the sort of the furthermost bottom part of the terminal. So I don't quite know what that's about. But yeah, so there we go, you tighten them up and you make sure that one's not touching either. At the same time, what I'd also say is you want to check the window on the coil itself and make sure that it sits almost flush with the coil, as you can sort of see there. That's basically for the air intake purposes. You don't want this too far to the top. Obviously you could potentially end up burning the plastic mouthpiece or tip, as it were, and yeah, that's not particularly good either. So you tighten these up, it should be all good to go. Sometimes if you've got a bit of a kink in the coil itself, what you can do is go back to this and just use that to sort of straighten it out a bit. Obviously you want that located so you've got cotton in there, obviously going through the coil itself. Now for the other fun bit, this is when you kind of, in my situation, because preparation isn't something I'm particularly flush at with regards to some of these videos, it's just lack of preparation basically. What I'll do is I'll use one of the batteries from the Smock Alien, and we'll chuck that in there, and I'll show you now actually before I put the battery in, just to save any issues in a minute. So you just basically fit that on there. So you want the positive end of the battery, which is going to be that end. He says, you'll see now it'll either work or it won't. So that's telling me it's got a level of power. So this is at 0.17 ohms at the moment. And what you can do is fire it up. So we've got 3.59 volts in the battery, or 3.56. And typically it's telling me that it's too low. Now that could be the battery is too low, or that the ohms are too low. I've heard lots of stories. This is the other good thing that these tips are for, ceramic tips, is that you can actually use it to spread out that wire a little bit. Let's go back to meter. So now it's at 0.2. Obviously you're expanding the coils, as it were. Yeah, typical. Right, okay, so we'll try again. Can I not plug this into the mains? Well, that being said, bit embarrassing, I suppose. Right, so that's just going to switch itself on. What you can do, one of the advantages of the Smoke Alien 220 is it does actually have a failsafe in it, so if there's a problem with the ohms it won't let it fire up, which is a good thing, particularly in situations like this. Now I tend to know that 0.2 and even 0.17 ohms is generally okay. You know, it's only when you go proper sub ohm that it starts getting a bit tetchy, and probably not something you want to mess around with. Right, so that's pretty much the coil built up. I'll just put some of these away like that. Anyone would think I'm fairly organised, you'd be mistaken. Oh, one of them. Just chuck that away. Needless to say, I do actually recommend people using these little coil master, or just coil testers, I suppose, to check the ohms. Next on this one is down to the cotton. Oh, there we go. There you go, there's nothing like being prepared, eh guys? Yeah, so I suppose reverting back to the whole thing about this is stuff I use, the old cotton bacon. I've had this packet quite a while now. The thing is, it does, you know, the wire and the cotton itself does last a hell of a lot longer than the sort of prefab, pre-made coils that you can buy from Smock as well. I dare say they've probably got a disclaimer in there. Now, Square.Peg was saying about how people do their cotton and how they do it. Generally, if I haven't got a little bit of oil or whatever on my fingers already, like I kind of have done, this is just kind of soaking up the excess from the last coil that I had in there, I tend to do is just sort of wind it around like that a little bit, and then depending on the inner circumference, like a 35 on this one, what I'll do is I'll pull it through, bend it in half and pull it through twice, sort of thing. Well, actually no, it's a lot, I only pull it through once, you know what I mean, I hope. So that's how I tend to do this bit. So I'm just a bit close to the camera. It's getting hard to judge, I can't actually see that well what I'm actually doing. So that technically makes me a ninja. So here we go. What you can do, I tend to wet the end a little bit, like that. A bit of water or a bit of saliva works well, whichever floats your boat. Then you just basically put it through like that. And you just give it a bit of that. And then just fold the ends down like that. And then all you're doing then, I tend to flip it so that you don't get the sort of split where you've bent it. Or folded it, should I say. Just trim that bit off there. Put that in there. Switch that off. Happy days. I know it's a 20-minute long video and I'm not even talking about anything MIG-toe or anything like that. You know, I suppose it makes a nice change. You know, for me at least. It doesn't seem like I'm bitching about the state of the world. Well, I say that. Right, so now what we can do is switch the Smock Alien on. And while that's doing that, chuck that over there. Oh look, by the way, I'm not advertising for anyone. They're not giving me any money for the stuff that I use. It's just the stuff that works for me. Right, so now it's just a case of dousing that in the old vape juice. Like I said, I'm using Riot Squad Sublime at the moment. And just basically get as much of that in there as you can. Get it all nice and soaking. And Bob's your uncle. So, there we go. Now, last give us a new coil. New coil, it's 0.12, the old one is 0.17. So we'll just go with new coil. We definitely don't want it at 80 watts. That's the other important thing. Always make sure you take that back down to where you had it. I had it about 33 if I remember rightly. But again, the sort of watts or temperature, however you want to work about it, it's whatever you're comfortable with, and obviously keep an eye on what's going on. So with that, I suppose the argument is, were the tobacco companies actually a little bit miffed that, you know, everyone's going on about, oh yeah, you've got to be healthier and like smoking's bad, this, that and the third. But despite that, the fact that there's been no actual evidence, scientific evidence I might add, that vaping is actually physically harmful, whether it's your lungs or whatever, nothing has been really brought to the table, and nothing has been for a few years, because obviously, you know, at the moment we've got this whole other thing going on, so that's kind of taken the forefront of science. So in that aspect, they can kind of just revert back to, oh yeah, it's bad. and not really come up with an argument or any evidence of such. Look, that is just my opinion and my thoughts on that one. I could be wrong, and if I am, feel free to correct me and send me some links so I can learn about something. You know, we've all heard the horror stories of popcorn lung and all this from vaping, but I know quite a lot of people that vape, and their health doesn't seem to be have been affected that much. In terms of using it to stop smoking, one of the guys that I know, didn't quite work out for him. He got to the point where he was spending as much on vape juice and everything else, and he made his own. He was spending as much on that as he was on smoking cigarettes, and he always had the itching, so unfortunately it didn't quite work out for him, but there we go. So yeah, I suppose that's a good demonstration, a good little kit. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's how to make your own coils, as it were. I'm sure there's probably 100 million other videos you could find out there by other guys that have got vape shops and they're selling their vape juice and this, that and the third, and you know, they could probably give a more in-depth review, but you know, I think given the topics and given the subject, it's just like a little something to put out there, I suppose. And do I think that the tobacco companies were doing stuff like pushing their own narrative? Because, you know, it's like anything else. As soon as a replacement comes up for a standard way of life that might affect a business, and you got to remember, right? You got to look at it like this. The government has the power, as it were, to decide what is and what isn't legal, the whys and wherefores. And just to bring this up as an argument, because it's one of my favourite arguments, is if the government really cared about the people that much, right, alcohol would not be legal. Now, we saw what happened in America back in the 40s and 50s with the whole alcohol runs and this, that and the third, and everything else that went down with it. Obviously, this is when, you know, crime, air quotes, crime was at a high regarding alcohol, and it had a high market value because of its lack of availability. But the government only declassified it as a controlled substance because of the outrage, the fact that they couldn't stop it. The same could be said for a lot of the other sort of substances that are out there. It doesn't matter whether it's weed or harder stuff. Realistically speaking, one of the biggest killers, and I'll bring it up again just for the sake of it, proving a point, is alcohol. You know, it causes kidney damage, and sure, you could argue the same for smoking and smoking weed and, you know, smoking crack, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. But if the government really cared about people's health, you know, alcohol wouldn't be legal. Now, to bring this one round as well, because obviously we had a thing recently whereas they're talking about reopening the pubs and not serving alcohol. It's like, okay then, well, from a typical your average guy's point of view, which I'm not your average guy because I don't do the things that average guys do. Far from average, thank you very much in that one. Read into that as you will. And you know, I have no interest in going to the pub, but if I was the average guy, I'm going to go to the pub to see my mates and have a drink. You know, not to see my mates and have an orange juice. So, you know, you could argue that this whole thing that's been happening since 2020 or 2019, depending on how you look at it, you could argue that it's all been brought in deliberately as a means of control, taking away further rights and just being able to willfully impose whatever they want in the name of the people's health. They ain't never cared about your health. Even with the National Health Service, the reason they do kind of care about people's health is because there's more taxpayers, which means more people putting money into the system. And look at the amount of debt this last year so far has cost at least the United Kingdom. Sure, money printers can go brrr and print out a load of money, but that's just it. Then the whole economy is just bust then, isn't it? It's broken. So, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thoughts, comments, opinions, feel free to jot them down as always. Till the next one, stay cool, stay free, and peace out.